Not yet knowing the Continental Army was established in Philadelphia just days beforehand, the Army of Observation in Boston engaged the British Army at the Battle of Bunker Hill on June 17, 1775. How did this battle take place? What were the tactics used by the colonials and the British? What was the impact of this battle on the American Revolution? For answers to these questions and more Army History Insights, stay tuned.
Welcome to the U.S. Army History and Heritage Podcast, the official podcast of the United States Army Center of Military History. The Center of Military History writes and publishes the Army's official history, manages the U.S. Army Museum Enterprise, and provides historical support throughout the U.S. Army.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the United States Army History and Heritage Podcast. I'm Lee Reynolds, the Strategic Communications Officer for the Center of Military History. In this episode, we're discussing the Battle of Bunker Hill in the American Revolution. Joining me for this discussion is Army historian Major Jonathan Bratten. Welcome, Major Bratten.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here again.
Yes, you've been a frequent guest here with our Revolutionary War, and I know you're an expert in the area, and you've visited these sites many times, so I'm anxious to get into the discussion. But before we do, let's give a little background on Major Bratten. So Major Jonathan Bratten is a command historian for the Maine Army National Guard and is assigned as the National Guard Bureau's Revolutionary War 250 liaison to the Center of Military History. He holds a bachelor's and a master's degree in history, has served 2 company command tours, and served as an instructor in the Department of History for the United States Military Academy at West Point from 2021 to 2022. He's a combat veteran of Afghanistan and worked as a historical on-screen advisor for the Smithsonian Channel documentary Americans Underground: Secrets of World War I. He has published articles in Army History Magazine, The Washington Post, and the New York Times, and contributed chapters to several historical anthologies. In 2020, he published To the Last Man, a National Guard Regiment in the Great War, 1917 to 1919, for which he received the 2020 Army Historical Foundation's Distinguished Writing Award. Major Bratten has also contributed to the CMH Revolutionary War pamphlet series as a writer and managing editor. A lot of work there, a lot of credibility to you as a historian. So, Major Bratten, let's just jump right into it. By June of 1775, a lot has already happened in the war. The battles of Lexington and Concord, the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, and of course, the establishment of the Continental Army on 14 June, to which these folks in Boston still don't know has happened yet. Now, 3 days later, a major battle takes place in Boston at Bunker Hill and Breed's Hill. So can you first explain how the events led to this battle?
Yeah, so it's one of those things where this is a battle that probably shouldn't have taken place and yet did. You've got these British forces cooped up in Boston, right? You know, they've been hemmed in by provincial forces, beginning with these Massachusetts troops right after Lexington and Concord, and then followed up with all the New England states then send troops. So you've got, depending on the day, between 15 to 20,000 troops surrounding Boston, what's called the New England Army of Observation. Now, and as you mentioned, a lot of things happen, and there's little skirmishes and things like that, and everyone's really trying to figure out kind of what this war is going to be. And the British have doubled down. They've not wavered since Lexington and Concord. In fact, General Thomas Gage, who's the overall commander in Boston, receives reinforcements, more infantry reinforcements, artillery reinforcements. He also receives additional reinforcements that he probably didn't want, which are three more major generals, which is exactly what a major general in command of a theater wants.
Exactly.
So you get, enter William Howe, Charles Cornwallis, and Henry Clinton, people who are going to have big names throughout the rest of the Revolution.
Mm-hmm. But are they subordinate to him at this time?
They are.
All right. They're not like equal commands or anything.
They are subordinate, but they have big opinions.
Okay, right. And personalities.
Right. Yes. So when they arrive, they immediately begin to look at the situation around Boston and think about how do we get out of this. And their first thing is we need to create some breathing space, some mobility. So if you look at Boston, you've really got two key points of terrain. One is the Boston Neck, a very narrow spit of land that connects Boston with the surrounding countryside. So trying to force that would be very difficult. It's a fatal funnel type situation. The other option would be to clear out the Charlestown Peninsula and move into Cambridge and then move into the surrounding area from there. And so the British are looking at an offensive that would seize the Charlestown Peninsula to be able to open Boston Neck. So sort of a shaping operation to a decisive operation. And of course, like everything that happens in Boston, this remains a deep, dark secret to absolutely no one. The colonial leadership gets word, and this is really what precipitates this troop movement towards the Charlestown Peninsula.
The reason everybody knows it is, there's spies everywhere, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. You've got, it's the same thing with Lexington and Concord. By now, you've got a pretty well-established underground intelligence network in Boston of Sons of Liberty, people sympathetic to the sort of patriot cause, disaffected British soldiers who are tired of being stuck in Boston. So there's a lot of information that comes back very quickly. The sort of overall command of the Army of Observation is this sort of Council of New England Generals, Artemus Ward being one of the more prominent and senior Massachusetts generals. And they make the decision on the 16th to sort of preclude the British from seizing the Charlestown Peninsula to be able to essentially use that as a movement corridor towards Cambridge and sort of the heart of the Patriot Army that's gathered there.
So they understand the British are going to try to expand, and they try to prevent that. So then on the night of 16 to 17 June, the Colonials prepare a series of redoubt positions. So can you talk about that and who led the operation and what their plan was?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. They send Colonel William Prescott, who's sort of the operational overall commander with elements of about 3 different Massachusetts regiments, about 900 to 1,000 men go up with the Army's chief engineer, Colonel Richard Gridley. They go up on the night of the 16th to survey the ground. And so
Bunker Hill.
Well,
with that said, because I wanted to create that distinction. Yeah, because Bunker Hill was what, the tallest hill in that area.
Yes, and they go to Bunker Hill. Mm-hmm. They look around, and this is where a little bit of historical controversy comes in.
Yeah.
Of why they didn't stay on Bunker Hill. It is the summit on the Charlestown Peninsula. It's the most commanding terrain. And then further down the slope, about 200-300 yards, is Breed's Hill, a lower elevation that looks directly on the waterline. So if you were to be trying to stop an invasion sort of at the water's edge, this might be your spot. But where they build their major fortification, this redoubt with 9-foot high earthen walls, very simple. It's a square fortification. You can't affect the beach really with your small arms. So Is this a attempt to stop the British from advancing, or is this a attempt to, I don't know, thumb your nose at the royal authorities and try to bring on a general engagement? We don't really know. Everyone got really cagey after the fact.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Because it spoiler alert, it turns out okay for the colonial side, but everyone looks at the terrain on Bunkers Hill, and then they decide that nope, they're going to move down to Breeds. Through the night, these men build this, and
it's extraordinary. I mean,
yeah, and you have to imagine they're staring down at these ships of the Royal Navy mounting 36, 44, massive frigates filled with artillery, just waiting for these things to start firing at any moment. And luckily, throughout the night, the ships remain quiet. And so by morning, you've got the British admiral waking up to find that there is a fort overlooking his fleet, his squadron. And then Gage waking up and looking out, and you can see directly from Gage's headquarters out towards Charlestown, you would be able to see this fort that suddenly sprang up in the middle of the night.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And so they see this on the morning of the 17th, and what's their reaction?
Well, it's you've got a bunch of generals, got to do something. So one, the one course of action that's the throwaway is let's do nothing.
Right. Yeah.
No one's opting for that. Everyone opts for an offensive course of action, and probably, honestly, a little bit more aggressive than Gage would have wanted to be, precisely because he's got these three other major generals who are like, hey, we should do this, and it's General Howe is the one who comes up with this plan. That they are going to move troops by boat, do essentially an amphibious landing on the Charlestown Peninsula. In
one location, or are they going to try and come around the back? Or
so they're going to do a landing. They're going to basically seize a landing site on the tip of the peninsula, consolidate their forces there, and then Howe, using the covering fire of the Royal Navy to suppress the enemy, wants to plan a three-pronged assault, really a double envelopment. So fixing the enemy in front with his grenadiers, making what was called at the time a demonstration, literally just keeping everyone preoccupied looking forward, while he sends his light infantry around to the right along the bank of the Mystic River to slip in behind the provincials, and then another wing around the left into Charlestown itself under Brigadier General Robert Piggott. Thus, being able to come at the fortifications from both sides. This plan it's great, looks really good on paper.
Yeah.
As long as the terrain isn't there and the enemy isn't there, because what happens that morning is that you've got Prescott there, sort of going, okay, well, here I am in my little fort. The British Navy, every gun in the Royal Navy is like firing at me. What do we do from here? And they make this decision to hold and reinforce. And so elements of more and more units are showing up through the morning of the 17th, which is a pretty hot day. And so you've got Massachusetts troops primarily in the redoubt. There's a realization that, hey, we need to protect our flanks. So there's this there's this wooden fence that runs down to the water line that they reinforce. This is reinforced with Connecticut and New Hampshire troops, and then New Hampshire troops also extend all the way down to the water's edge, build a little rock wall there to protect the flank. So they're tying in with natural obstacles. They're using the terrain that's on the hill. They're digging in wherever possible. Not a lot of shovels and entrenching tools around. This is a thing that a lot of people.
The farmers, you thought they would have brought some stuff.
Right. Well, war means that everything gets picked clean pretty much immediately. So.
And did they have any cannon there?
They do. They bring up a couple field pieces. The Army's artillery is not yet professional. There's a few guns that are brought in inexplicably, after firing 2 shots, like one detachment of 2 guns just picks up and leaves.
Oh, wow.
And everyone's like, wait, what?
Oh.
There are some that stay there and are used to decent effect through the fight, but they're light. They're field guns. They can't really affect the ships. They're more designed to be anti-personnel. They don't play a huge role. What will play a huge role is masked musketry. Masked musketry.
Yeah.
Too many M's there.
Masked.
Masked.
Massing it. Yeah.
At that really close killing distance. That 20 to 30 yards, like
Wow.
the deadly zone, as we call it. And so that's the morning and into the afternoon, because it takes the British until the mid-afternoon to begin even ferrying troops over.
So the warmest part of the day, too.
Warmest part of the day. And by now, also, everyone knows what's going on. So, literally everybody in Boston is sitting on their roofs.
Oh,
everybody in the surrounding area is watching because they see this massive showdown. This isn't like Lexington and Concord, where no one knew what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. This is very public, very much in the open. That's possibly one of the reasons that you've got Prescott and his guys pushing down to Breed's Hill, is to make this really an open, flagrant defiance of the crown and force a reaction.
Yeah, don't allow the British to get that foothold, and that might be one of the reasons too they went to Breed's Hill.
Right, and also because there was this idea that something needed to happen, because public opinion is really out on what this revolution means. And also, is this a true, continental revolution? They don't know that the Continental Army has been created just a few days ago, and that they'll have aid from other troops. Right now, this is just New England fighting the British Empire.
and so Prescott, he was a veteran of the French and Indian War, right? So he had worked with the British beforehand. He understood their tactics. How much of the British plan did he anticipate?
I think from looking at the troop deployment, most of the regimental commanders had a pretty good understanding of what the British were going to do. If you've got John Stark from New Hampshire, who's a colonel of a New Hampshire regiment, and he's down on the waterline. The way that he actually lays out his defense shows that he knows exactly what he's up against. He's also a veteran of the French and Indian War, fought it with the Rangers, and what he does is he puts his men in 3 rows behind this stone wall, 3 ranks. And then about 30 paces away, he places white birch stakes in the ground. And he instructs his soldiers that when you see the British gaiters, their white leggings, pass these white birch stakes, that's when you open fire, and you aim at the leggings. Not because he realizes that these are all green troops, new soldiers, the tendency is always to fire high, even for professionals. The British soldiers that day are going to be firing high a lot. So why aim at the gaiters? Because the natural point of aim is then going to drift center mass.
All right.
And we'll see how this plays out in the
smart
with Howe's attack.
But that shows you a veteran of conflict.
He
understands
these guys
warfare.
know exactly what they're doing.
Before we move on to how the battle laid out, there was also another general there. But you had Colonel Prescott, who was in charge, but you had General Warren?
Yeah.
Or Dr. Joseph Warren there.
Dr. General President Joseph Warren.
Yeah, so can we talk just a little bit about him before we get into battle? Who was he? And even though he was there, he decided not to be a general.
Yeah, Joseph Warren's one of the more fascinating individuals of the Revolution. Nathaniel Philbrick thinks that he would be, he would be Washington. Had he lived.
Right.
Oops, spoiler. He's a very, very prominent physician in Boston, very well liked by everybody, including the British. He kept very good relations, which was good because he was, responsible for running sort of the spy network inside Boston as part of the Committee of Safety. And so he's prominent politically, he's prominent socially, and he is this figure who is charismatic enough and is good at planning to the point where he could really be this senior army commander. And in fact, he is a general. But when he shows up mid-morning to the redoubt and offers his services to Prescott as a private, because he says basically you need, here you don't need generals, you need more muskets.
Yeah.
And this becomes true as the day goes on, because what's happening is this isn't a static battlefield. You have the Royal Navy is just pounding these fortifications. There's a psychological aspect to it. They actually have ships and floating batteries on either side of the peninsula, and they're sweeping the entryway to the peninsula with fire. Mm-hmm. So troops that are coming onto the peninsula are running this gauntlet of artillery. And these are volunteers who just they just sort of showed up, and throughout the day, Prescott and the colonial strength is going to dwindle because more and more men are going to leave the battle line going, you know what, I didn't sign up for this. Wow. This is and so the strength will begin to sort of winnow away, especially as casualties are produced. Instead of one guy helping someone off the battlefield, maybe it's two guys or three guys.
Right.
And then that's 4 muskets off the line. So it's a very dynamic, difficult situation. One of the colonial generals, Rufus Putnam from Connecticut, is trying to sort of funnel troops onto the peninsula and also get more ammunition to them, because he's aware that they're going to have an ammunition shortage. But again, that British fire is so effective, it's very difficult to push more troops out there.
Yeah, they're literally being tested under fire here. So,
yes.
All right, so everything's laid out, ready to go. Describe the battle. How did it actually take place?
So, best laid plans, right? Never survive first contact,
right.
and that's General Howe. He gets his first taste of combat in this war in North America. He is a veteran of wars. In fact, his older brother, the other Howe brother, because he's got another Howe brother who's the commander in the Royal Navy, Richard Howe. Who's on station, and then their older brother was killed at Ticonderoga, then called Carillon, in attacking the French in the 7 Years' War. So a lot of family connections to North America, but he believes that he can, with his double envelopment, he can break this position without too many casualties. So he sends the light infantry column around to the right. Remember, these are the light infantry companies, most of whom had suffered the most heavily at Lexington and Concord just a few months prior. They're already pretty well attrited, and now they run into Stark's New Hampshire line. And when I say that we're talking about World War I levels of casualties, the first company, the 4th Foot, takes 85% casualties in about 30 seconds. The light infantry are absolutely decimated from this rolling fire along the beach, and
combined arms,
and they're absolutely. You've got sergeants and privates leading companies. After this,
wow.
So they are taken out of the fight with about 65% casualties in total of this essential battalion that goes in. So just as this fighting is beginning, Howe is realizing it's not going to go the way he wants. Pigot's line goes against Charlestown. There's skirmishers in these buildings. Pigot is reluctant to begin an urban battle, so he asks Howe if he can burn the town.
Oh, wow.
Which is a very good indicator of where we've gotten in the war.
Yeah.
That already there's this discussion of, we'll burn towns. And so the Royal Navy opens up with red hot shot. There's cannons in Boston that are firing, and Charlestown is set ablaze. So now you added to this whole scene, there's like this pall of black smoke as this town is burning. And now Howe sends he sends his first line forward, his grenadiers, his main battle line regiments, right up the center. And immediately they're confronted with the fact that they're advancing through farm fields, filled with fences, and you have to negotiate all these obstacles. And then there's, a few Americans begin opening fire without orders, and no one likes to get shot at without shooting back. So a lot of the grenadiers halt, a lot of the British soldiers halt and return fire. Now, the problem with this is that in 18th century combat, the goal is not to stand 30 paces away and just blaze away at each other. That's a really good way to lose a bunch of people. Everyone knows this. The goal is for one side to close with the enemy with a bayonet and either force them to run away. Usually most people are risk averse when it comes to facing 500 people charging at them with pointy steel. But you have to close that distance, and that's very hard to do psychologically. And so the British fail this test and immediately begin trading volleys, and it's not an equal contest. You've got British soldiers who are standing in waist-high grass. It's a hot day. They're weighed down with all their equipment. They're firing high versus these guys who are in their shirt sleeves and they're fighting from behind cover and they're just laying into them. And so Howe immediately is taking massive losses and is pushed back. He's going to reset and make this assault 3 times.
Wow, the same assault, the same land.
The same assault. The second assault goes pretty much as the same as the first. He can't manipulate his right and left to converge on the redoubt at the same time. The American volume of fire is just so heavy that they cannot advance. He gets reinforcements from General Henry Clinton, comes across, narrowly misses getting shot just as he gets off the boat. It's like, hey, welcome to warfare in North America. And it's really turning into this like grudge match, this bloodbath on Breed's Hill.
And so 2 assaults have failed.
2 assaults fail. And at the second one, Howe is left standing. He accompanies his troops. He's not these are not cowardly men. They go forward, they lead by example. And here's this major general surrounded by his staff who are all dead and wounded. And he's the only one left who's standing there. And this is really important for us to remember when we're going to look down the road at what Howe is going to do as the overall commander of forces in North America, which he will be coming up in the next few months, because he's going to be very reluctant to attack fortified American positions. They did not think that the Americans would be able to stay and fight. But Howe pulls back. They reconsolidate. He tells the British soldiers to drop their packs, drop their heavy jackets, really get down to their shirt sleeves. And then again, it's reiterated to them, close with the enemy, get within bayonet distance, so to speak. And they're aided in this by the fact that the Americans are running out of ammunition.
But do they know that?
They don't know that. No, they don't know that. But the Americans are they're really down to their last 2 to 3 cartridges per soldier. As I mentioned, this force has been gradually shrinking throughout the day, so it's not the same volume of fire. So now, very late afternoon, Howe is ordering his third assault, and now with the instructions that both wings just focus on the redoubt. Ignore the fence, ignore anything else. Just really come in, close in mass and concentration on the redoubt. And they're met with the same volley of musketry that's just as deadly as before. Two really savage volleys, and then kind of just a spattering of musketry, and that's all it needs for those walls of British soldiers to surge over the parapet, and then they begin hand-to-hand combat. And most of the American soldiers do not have bayonets. Some of them do. Wow. It's very hard to actually do hand-to-hand fighting when you're just like trying to hit somebody with the end of your musket when they've got 3.5 feet of steel with a pointy end on it.
Yeah,
and this is where, when you talk about professionalization of an army, later on we'll talk about how Steuben will come in and professionalize the Continental Army. What makes the British troops professional on June 17th? Well, one, that they make that attack 3 times, and by that third assault, they're walking over the bodies of the dead and wounded.
Because you're talking about the casualties. The British are taking tremendous amount of casualties.
They are. This is one of their bloodiest battles in the Revolution.
What were the casualties on the colonial side?
Really, up until the redoubt fight, not many.
Wow.
You're mostly looking at casualties from artillery fire. With the hand-to-hand fighting in the redoubt, where you've got these professionally trained British soldiers who know how to use the bayonet, who this is what they're trained to do, up against guys who are really trying to get out of there. Colonel Prescott gives the order pretty much, every man for themselves. Get out.
Okay.
Get out of this death trap. That's where they take the most of their casualties, and you're looking at it's hard to. It's hard to always get the right numbers, but you're looking around 75 to 85 American dead, up against it's around like 160, 100, close on 200 British dead. But the highest British casualties are in the officer ranks. I think there's an estimate of something like 10% of these are always hard because dealing with personnel numbers in 18th centuries is rough when personnel lists don't always survive. But you're looking at something like 10% of British officers in North America become casualties that day.
Oh, wow. And is that because they were out front, or was it a purposeful targeting of the officers, or was it a mixture of both?
I think it's a mixture of both. I mean, by virtue of the fact that these units are being led by example by their officers, and so of course Americans are going to be looking to shoot at the people giving orders. That is also, that's not just target the officers because they're officers. It's also a function of how do you get command and control in a regular unit to break down. Shoot the person giving the orders. These are orders based. These are not people who are advancing with
cut off the head, right?
Yeah. They're not operating off of their own, the individual initiative. They're operating off of a given set of order, forward march.
Right. And that's something, and a little bit off topic, difference between the American Army in modern times and like the Russians or the Chinese. We always said we have commander's intent. Right. So if you lose your officers, at least you know what the intent was, and you can continue on. Something that the communist forces, the Russians, the Chinese don't have. And was that the way with the British Army? Did they lose their officers? Did they still understand commander's intent and knew to move on, or were they going to wait for orders?
So, the idea of commander's intent is very much a 19th century idea. All professional armies are going to be, including the Continental Army, will be fighting, by orders from their officers, simply because it's the easiest way to create or to keep a large group of people from being an armed mob. It's discipline and discipline that keeps an armed mob, or turns an armed mob into an army. And so having that ability to stand under fire and wait for the orders of an officer or a non-commissioned officer. Usually your non-commissioned officers are the ones responsible for keeping soldiers in the ranks, called file closers, literally just staying in line, ensuring that the lines are dressed. That's very difficult. There's a reason I think it's Chippewa in 1814, where you've got Americans advancing and doing the thing of just standing under fire and taking it and not running, and causing the British to say, those are regulars, by God.
Oh, yeah.
Because it defies all common sense. But that's also how you win. Is by taking that hammering and then finding that weak spot, finding the flank, finding a break in the line, closing, and then hopefully one side or the other is going to give way. Not a lot of bayonet fighting that happens because one side or the other is like, I'm out. And so that's the goal. So when we look at sort of how command relationships work, the Americans are looking to get on the same level as the British, and we're always like we treat doctrine like a buffet. We'll take a little from the Germans, we'll take a little from the French, we'll take a little from the British. What do the Russians do? We'll take a little of that. And that's when Scheuben puts together his Blue Book. That's what he's doing. Is he's amalgamating and then throwing a few like uniquely American ideas in there. But it's essentially like this hodgepodge smorgasbord thing that is this new Blue Book.
I that's funny. Moving up in years, I think it was in the 80s when a Russian general said the problem with the Americans is they don't read their own manuals. So I see this happening century after century with the American Army. Is we have this doctrine, we have these tactics, but we'll do what we want,
And Bunker Hill is it's unfortunately too successful for the Americans. Yes, it's a tactical defeat, but it's such a high cost for the British. American General Nathaniel Greene says, I wish we had 100 such hills to give them at that price.
Oh wow, wow. That's impactful.
And it is such a shocking loss, to have these hundreds and hundreds of wounded soldiers that have to go back to Boston, and then at the end of the day, the British just say, "Well, we got this hill." And from the American side, it's this huge propaganda piece. These farmers, these rabble, just defeated. This isn't a Lexington and Concord, a hit and run, ambushes and rout type thing. This is a open battle. Yeah. Everyone saw it. Everyone in the surrounding area saw it. So it becomes this very big rallying cry. But the problem is, it's too successful. People begin to think, well, anyone can, fight. Any American is somehow gifted enough to be able to fight the British professionals without much training. So when Washington's like, no, hey, states, like you need to enlist your soldiers for more than just 1 year. You need multiple year to the end of the war. We're going to have standards of training. You have a lot of people who just will point at Bunker Hill and say, well, no, the militia are just fine. They can carry the war.
Oh, wow.
And this actually becomes a huge problem in American history writ large, American military history, and specifically the size of the Army. The United States has this hereditary angst about a large standing army that we get from the British. And it keeps the regular army small until really the 20th century.
Yeah, same thing till World War I,
really. Really, I mean, post World War II is when we actually get anything comparable to the size of the army that we have today. This is relatively unknown in American history. Yeah. And the argument is always, well, why do we need a regular force? Look at Bunker Hill.
Yeah.
And Bunker Hill's an anomaly. It's a one-off. It's one of these things that you can't really repeat. And also, because of Howe's experience at Bunker Hill, he's not going to do that again. He's not going to attack dug-in American positions unless he's got overwhelming firepower, overwhelming superiority, and has opened a flank, as you'll see in New York 1776.
So not only did the colonials' mindset get affected by Bunker Hill, but the British too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. And you've got you have a bunch of one, it dispels a lot of notions. One, it dispels the notion that this is going to be a quick war. Always needs to happen in the first 90 days of a conflict.
Right.
There's the Americans can see, wow, the British are willing to take a lot of casualties. And the British say, wow, the Americans can fight. They have put together a field army. This is going to be a longer contest than we probably thought. We now need to begin thinking about options. And this is where, in 1776, they'll abandon Boston in favor of a push on New York and also a push on Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston will be a failure for the British in 1776, but New York is going to be where General Howe has his big win, except he can't get at that, completely destroy that Continental Army. Probably because he's very averse to attacking it when it's dug in, which is, I think, a thing Washington realizes and uses to his advantage.
So we talked about, tactical victory for the British, but it's kind of a strategic loss. So what is the overall strategic impact of this battle on the American Revolution?
So by beginning of July, on the American side, this new guy shows up to take command of this Army of Observation, which is now the Continental Army. This guy called George Washington.
I've heard of him.
Yep. And he looks at Bunker Hill a little bit as sort of what I mentioned of it was almost too successful. These guys think they're really good. They don't think they need to get any better. Wow. And he's like, guys, Washington's the only guy in the only American in the French and Indian War to have commanded at the brigade level. And so he's going, look, we need to do a lot of things. One, our sanitation is terrible. Our fortifications are not great. Like we need to do a lot of discipline. Needs to be improved at the lowest level. And he sees Bunker Hill as almost a detriment to his mission of trying to get this army better, because these New Englanders don't think that they need to get any better because they already beat the British twice, as they see it. But in the national psyche, it's a huge boost. It shows that for all these states that were sitting on the edge, I should say colonies at this point, they're not states yet. Do we join? Do we not? Bunker Hill brings a lot of them to the yes, I think we can do this side. And then for the British, it's a national punch in the gut. It's a huge public disgrace. As I said, everyone watched this happen. There's no hiding it. This bloodbath, and so it causes the British sort of war ministry to change their plans for the course of the war in North America through the next coming years. One, they're looking at this as a year's projection.
Okay, yeah.
And not just, by the fall, we'll have this all under wraps.
Yeah, home by Christmas, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
So does Colonel Prescott survive the battle?
He does. Prescott survives the battle. Who does not survive, as I mentioned earlier, is Joseph Warren. Joseph Warren is shot in the redoubt, and it's kind of hard to talk about because he was such a well-loved man that the British felt his betrayal. I mean, not just the fact that he was on the colonial, on this rebellious side, but bearing arms against them. His body was bayoneted about 20 to 30 times after he was killed. He was pretty much mutilated by the British. And it shows this breakdown, just like the burning of Charlestown, it becomes this breakdown of norms that are beginning to characterize this new conflict very early on, and it's only going to get worse as the war goes on. Prescott survives, but Warren dies there, and it's the end of a career that we don't know what that would have looked like. He could have gone on to be, president of the Continental Congress, could be first president, could have been a great general under Washington, might have had command of the Continental Army had he. Had he lived one day. We don't know.
Unfulfilled potential, right?
Yeah, a lot of what if.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thanks so much. Anything else about this battle that you wanted to touch on?
So there's some really interesting, I don't want to say trivia when it involves people's lives, but Major Pitcairn, John Pitcairn, who was second in command of the British expedition to Concord in April. He's involved in this attack with his Marines, and he's actually he makes it to the parapet of the redoubt when he is shot and killed. There naturally, with any big event, there are multiple people who take credit for it. There are four individuals who have credit with eyewitness credit with shooting him. One of whom was a enslaved man of color who was in a Massachusetts regiment. His master gave him his freedom, and he served in the Continental Army for the duration of the war. Showing that these are Americans of all walks of life who are serving in these colonial units. And which is a thing that Washington with his background is going to have to sort of contest with, and then after a while be like, man, they're really good soldiers. I need everybody to fight this war. It just shows that we've got Americans of all background at these critical moments in our Army history.
Yeah, and before we close, it's time for Huzzah Trivia. So is there some piece of trivia that you can share about the battles of Bunker Hill?
Yes. One of, I love logistics. I think it's one of the things that I nerd out over logistics, maybe as an engineer officer.
It's critical to warfare.
It's
Absolutely
huge,
critical.
and no one would agree with you more than William Howe, who, as part of his plan, it was to have a battery of field guns advance with his infantry to keep the Americans heads down with grape shot fired at close range. Wow. He was going to have his 6-pounders brought forward, and they were going to just have that suppressing fire. Well, when they go to open the limber chests, they find that they brought out 12-pound shot.
Oh no!
So
wow.
None of the ammunition that they have is actually usable for the guns. So kids, if you're going to war, make sure you've got the right ammunition for the job, for the caliber of the weapons that you have.
That's interesting. And did Howe ever use that tactic before or after?
It was a very common. So most field artillery, when we think about, you as a good field artilleryman with your background, we think of engaging the enemy with fires to disrupt, fix, block, etc. Be able to affect them from distance, right? At the time, you're looking at, if you should think of artillery almost as a machine gun, as a suppression.
Direct fire is what we call it.
Yeah, direct fire, suppression, area weapons. You do have some indirect from mortars, but most of the time it's most effective when used in conjunction with the infantry, rolled forward, really as this mobile attacking platform. And so very common. Napoleon is going to sort of revolutionize, Frederick the Great sort of begins it in the 1760s. Then Napoleon's going to take that and just create the grand battery. We're going to take that idea and make mobile artillery in the 1840s during the Mexican War, these highly mobile, very effective field artillery. So you can see the development and the through line of the American field artillery excellence through this period, really coming to the fore in the Civil War when we have some of the best gunners, and then World War I and World War II.
That's why they call us the King of Battle.
They do say that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Major Bratten, for your insights today about the Battle of Bunker Hill. And if anyone wants to learn more about the American Revolution or learn more about Army history in general, then I encourage you to explore our website at history.army.mil. And we've got a new series of pamphlets, monographs, if you want to call them, short reads about the Revolutionary War. It'll be a series of 13 of these publications, and the Battle of Bunker Hill is our very first one, called Opening Shots, which is available from our website as a free PDF download, or there's instructions how you can order to get a hard copy as well. So check those out; they're great reads. And Major Bratten was heavily involved in writing and editing these volumes. So, and also, if you want to explore Army history every day, then I encourage you to check out our social media on Facebook, X, and Instagram. So thanks for joining us today on the United States Army History and Heritage Podcast. For the Center of Military History, I'm Lee Reynolds, and until next time, we're history.
The views expressed in this podcast reflect those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views, policies, or opinions of the U.S. Army or Department of Defense. For more information about the Army's proud history and heritage, go to history.army.mil.